you know? And it's surprising to me. Well, really, it isn't. If you think about the state of the church today, how people can think they know more than the Code of Canon Law, more than the Magisterium. Oh, we don't have to listen to these seals. Well, then why are you a Catholic? Make up your mind. Either you follow the rules the Catholic Church lays down, or leave. Be honest. Don't be a hypocrite. But the point is, it's not easy to obey.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to Armor of God again, and as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and hopefully you'll be edified with what we've put together for all of you here. Anyway, for this video, I'd like to share something from Father Joseph Iannuzzi. Now, usually when I make videos that cover what Father Iannuzzi is saying something about being obedient towards the church, the magisterium, this type of video will receive a lot of thumbs down and people unsubscribing. But for those of you who are struggling with being obedient and are open to learning, then hopefully you'll find this video helpful. I realize by now it's really difficult to get through the stubborn hearts. For those who have already decided that Pope Francis is not the Pope, schism is somehow okay and not a big deal. Vatican II is a problem and everything else that comes along with it. So I don't mind people unsubscribing and hating on this video because I really want to share and spread the right message with the platforms that I have, and that is unity, obedience, and walking side by side with the church. In fact, let me share you this very short bit from Father Iannuzzi before we get on with the rest of the video.
Saint Maximilian Kolbe, he was asked the question, what if a superior tells me to do something that's evil? I actually asked this to my superior when I was a seminarian. It was 1991 in Italy. So when it came to obedience, I said to him, I don't understand quite what that means. So I said, what if my superior says, jump off a 5-story building? Am I supposed to obey him? And the superior who's teaching me obedience said to me, what would you do? And I said, I would say after you. And he said to me, good answer. So he agreed with me. So that's informed obedience, okay? Now, suppose I don't understand the concept of obedience, and I do follow the superior and jump. God will not hold that against me because my intention was to obey. And this happens and has happened to almost every saint as they grew and matured, and it happens to us.
I think that lays the foundation quite perfectly for the rest of this video. Now, the reason I want to make this video around the subject of obedience this time is not with the intention of creating a toxic comment section after this is released. If at all, it's much easier to make videos that make everybody feel good, to make videos that will not make people unsubscribe and receive hundreds of thumbs down. But from the beginning, I always want to make videos that educate and guide people to walk side by side with the church. Not everyone is going to agree with this, but that's the message that I've always placed great emphasis on from the very beginning. Ideally, it's best to be on friendly terms with everyone. But when people are walking away from the church due to their disobedience and misinterpretation of what the church objectively teaches, should I then ignore all that? So anyway, sorry for the rather long interruption, but here's one that I really want to share with you next from Father Iannuzzi.
Now, here's a question. Should we stick to what we want in the past, that we prefer church teaching, and not agree with church teaching today? For example, communion on the tongue or in the hand. On the tongue is the normative teaching, and it will never change. The extraordinary method is on the hand, and it's not a sacrilege to receive it on the hand if you do so with reverence. But some people I hear say it's a sacrilege. You can't do that. It's a mortal sin. It's not. If you receive it with reverence, it is not a mortal sin. But if you receive it with dirty hands, then it can be sinful, yes. So for a person to say church teaching in the past was right and today it's wrong, that's wrong. It's not so. Why? Because God gave in John's Gospel, we read this every Easter Sunday, the authority to bind and to loosen. What you bind or no shall be bound in, meaning God will abide by what the church goes along with. So you're not responsible, the church is, the hierarchy is, you see? And this is why when the apostles asked Jesus about divorce and the Mosaic law, Jesus said, Moses bent the law for you. Basically, he introduced a church law to satisfy or to meet the demands of the people that he was serving. Moses had that authority. Did Jesus condemn Moses? No. But Jesus said, basically, he bent the law for you. The church has that authority. But you're not responsible for that change. The person who makes it is responsible for that change. God gave the church that authority. So Jesus said it was not like this in the beginning, but Moses did this on account of the hardness of your hearts. I'm not saying the church bends the law just for its own gratification, but the reassurance we have is that the church is the responsible institution that Christ instituted with a hierarchical structure, the holy orders or the papacy, the episcopacy, the presbytery. They're the ones responsible, and it's our duty to obey our conscience, God, and the church in that order.
For the next clip of Father Iannuzzi, he was actually responding to a question that goes this way. To whom do we have to be obedient? Because it's natural to think Catholic priests have the authority, of course, and we have to listen to the priests. So to every Catholic priest, if the priest is saying something to us, who should we listen to and obey?
In fact, Cardinal Ratzinger put out a document on how we have three, in a hierarchical system, obligations of obedience. Number one is your conscience. That starts there, but it doesn't end there, because that's the first thing to form. Even before you know what the church teaches, you know what's right from wrong, that God puts in you. What is your conscience? It's the voice of God in your soul, telling you, don't do this, do that. And you don't even have to get educated to have this knowledge in terms of basic principles of right and wrong, like killing your parents. I use this example. How do you know it was wrong to kill your parents? Who told you that? Nobody told me that. I just know it's wrong. Well, where did that come from? God. That's your conscience. So if someone gets angry with you, you don't want to just kill them, get rid of them, but you don't do that because your conscience kicks in and says, no, you don't need someone to tell you to do that. Yourself and God, that's your conscience, number one. The second obligation of obedience after the conscience is God. That is found in Scripture. This is divine revelation. It's found also in tradition. Tradition includes the writings of the listeners to the apostles that iterated what the apostles verbally taught. Then the third is church teaching. So you have divine teaching and then ecclesial teaching. And this includes governance, discipline, morals, and faith. For example, the difference between divine and church can be, sometimes they are one and the same, like the resurrection. It's church teaching and it's also divine teaching. The Immaculate Conception, church teaching, divine teaching. But you have things that are just church teaching that are not divine teaching, like how to gestures of worship during the liturgy. Years ago, they were different than they are today, according to the different rites or liturgies. So, for example, in the East, Catholic, the Byzantine rite, they don't genuflect. They bow. They don't make the sign of the cross from left to right, but from right to left. That's not divine. That's church teaching, okay? So our obedience must be with our conscience, with God, and with the church.
For the next clip, Father Iannuzzi explains the reason why there are so many types of Catholics out there, from the conservative, ultra-conservative, liberal, and then the ultra-liberals. And I think by now you must have figured this one out, and it's all down to obedience.
And that is the two tiers of Catholics in the church today. Certainly there are subdivisions within these two tiers, and people generally refer them to such names like liberal or conservative. Now, it's not that generic, it's not that broad, even though people tend to use these generic terms, because there's a whole series of degrees in between conservative and liberal, and there are degrees outside, not between them, but beyond them. So you may have those that are ultra-liberal that go past the liberals in the far spectrum, far right spectrum, and then the ultra-liberal, ultra-conservatives, yeah, that's what I meant to say, ultra-conservatives who go beyond the conservatives in the far right spectrum, and the ultra-liberals who go beyond the liberals in the far left spectrum. Now, why are there so many degrees of people in this broad spectrum that goes from ultra-conservative to ultra-liberal? Why is that? Why can't they all be in the same degree? There are several reasons, but one of the main reasons is disobedience. That is probably the main reason. People like to do what they wish. They don't like to follow what the church says, some people. They like to follow what they believe the church should say. And this is called disobedience. And it can be moderate disobedience, or it could be pretty grave or severe disobedience. When people, for example, set themselves up as judges of how to interpret church documents, even though they don't have any schooling or credentials to do so. And this is dangerous. And we've seen that not one generation has had a shortage of these individuals who are rebellious, and that don't follow what the church teaches. And the church is very clear whenever it gives a teaching, pedagogy, catechesis, or even commentary through magisterial documents, papal bulls, exhortations, councils, synods, and the list goes on and on. And the church is very careful to qualify and clarify what it means when it teaches what it does. Because among all these degrees of different persuasions of Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Protestantism, all of which are Christian, with different faith systems, people follow what they think the church means without actually going to the documents and reading what the church teaches. That's my job as a theologian. Not all of you have the time to do this, so I'm sharing this with you. So the church has canons, like the Code of Canon Law, and it makes statements, and then it has commentaries on what these words mean. And then some people will disagree with it, say, no, this is not what it means. I know what it means. And you ask that person, well, what makes you an authority? I just feel it that way. And this is the reason why there were all these different degrees, from ultra-conservative to ultra-liberal, because most people, and I'm not saying they're bad intentioned, most people don't go out of their way to find out what the church means when it says something, but they just they interpret it the way they think the church means without actually seeking to know what it objectively teaches.
And now for the second part of this video, I'd like to continue where I left off from the last video, where I shared with the late Father Gabriele Amorth on the pains of hell. But this time, I'd like to share a conversation between Father Amorth and a bishop, which I think you'll find quite interesting. So what happened was, one day, a bishop called and asked Father Amorth to exorcise a certain person. At first, Father Amorth answered that it was his duty to appoint an exorcist, and the bishop replied that he had been unable to find a priest who would accept the task. Unfortunately, according to Father Amorth, this is a common occurrence. Often priests do not believe in exorcisms, but if the bishop offers them the office of exorcist, they feel as though 1,000 demons are upon them and refuse. And many times before, Father Amorth had written that the evil one is much more enraged when we take souls away from him through confession than when we take away bodies through exorcism. In fact, we cause the devil even greater rage by preaching, because faith sprouts from the Word of God. And this is why Father Amorth used to say that a priest who has the courage to preach and hear confessions should not be afraid to exorcise. Many priests are afraid of reprisal and forget that the devil already causes all the harm that God allows him. We can negotiate no peace with the devil. If the priests have lost their faith to the point of not believing in their power of exorcism and do not use it anymore, this is a horrible misfortune, a cruel duplicity that leads to the irrevocable abandonment, to the worst of enemies of those unfortunate souls who fill the hospitals and who are deemed victims of hysteria. And so, returning to the telephone call between Father Amorth and the bishop, he told the bishop that if he could not find a priest, he was obligated to perform the exorcism personally. And the bishop said, "Me? I would not know where to start." To which Father Amorth retorted with the words that Father Candido used with him when he began his apprenticeship. Start by reading the instructions in the ritual and recite the prescribed prayers over the person who requested them. This is the point of departure. The ritual for exorcisms starts by listing 21 norms that must be followed by the exorcist. The ritual begins by cautioning the exorcist against an easy belief in the presence of a demon and gives a series of practical rules, both to help recognize the presence of true possession and to guide the demeanor of the exorcist. The confusion of the bishop where he said, "I would not know where to start," is justified. As Father Amorth puts it, we cannot improvise an exorcism. It is one thing to read about something, it is another thing actually to see it. In reality, the starting point is different. When someone comes or is brought by family or friends to be exorcised, one starts with an examination to determine whether or not there are reasonable grounds for proceeding with an exorcism. Diagnosis can be made only by such an examination. One begins with the physical symptoms. The two areas most commonly affected by evil influences are the head and the stomach. In addition to headaches that are severe and unresponsive to prescriptions, symptoms include a sudden inability to learn. In particular, young people who never had trouble at school all of a sudden cannot study anymore, and their ability to concentrate disappears. The signs listed in the ritual are limited to the most spectacular manifestations of possession, such as the ability to speak or understand unknown languages perfectly, to know the hidden and the remote, or to demonstrate a superhuman physical strength. Often Father Amorth was told of strange or violent behavior. A typical symptom of evil influence is an aversion to the sacred. It happens then that prayerful people suddenly stop praying. Others stop going to church and become full of rage. Some suddenly blaspheme often and act violently against sacred images. Almost always Father Amorth also encountered such as anger against relatives or acquaintances and many types of bizarre behavior. The other area that is commonly affected by evil influences is the neck of the stomach, immediately under the sternum. There one can find acute and piercing pains for which no cure can be found. If the pain travels now to the entire stomach, then to the kidneys, later to the ovaries and so on, defying the understanding and remedies of medicine, it is a common indication of evil influence. In order to highlight this point, Father Amorth provided us with a case he worked on before, where he exorcised Mark, a young man who was the victim of a severe possession. He had been confined for a long time and had been tormented by psychiatric remedies, especially electroshock, without the slightest reaction. When the doctor prescribed sleep therapy, for an entire week they gave him enough sleeping pills to sedate an elephant. He never fell asleep, either during the day or during the night. He wandered around the hospital in a stupor, with wide open eyes. Finally, he landed at Father Amorth's doorstep with immediate positive results. Superhuman strength can also be a sign of diabolic possession. A demented person in an insane asylum can be immobilized with a straitjacket. A person possessed by demons, however, cannot be immobilized. He can even break iron chains. Father Candido once told Father Amorth of a thin, apparently weak girl who had to be subdued by force by 4 strong men during exorcisms. She broke every bond, even some heavy leather straps with which they tried to tie her down. Once, when she was tied with strong ropes to an iron bed, she broke some of the iron rods and folded others at a right angle. Many times the patient and his relatives, if the entire family is struck, hear strange noises, footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, objects that disappear and or appear in the most unlikely places. When Father Amorth conducted his investigation into the causes, he always asked when the occurrences started, if they can be tied to something concrete, if the patient participated in occult practices, if he approached card readers, and in case of a positive answer, how things have progressed. It is possible that, at the suggestion of some friends or acquaintances, the pillow or mattress of the afflicted person was opened, and there were found the most interesting objects, such as colored threads, tufts of hair, tresses, wooden or iron slivers, rosaries or ribbons tied with the tightest of knots, puppets, animal shapes, blood clots, or pebbles. These are a certain proof of sorcery. I'll share this one last bit from Father Gabriele Amorth's mentor. One day Father Candido asked a 13-year-old girl, 2 enemies who hated each other all their lives, hated each other to death, and both ended up in hell. What is the relationship that they will share now, since they will be with each other for all eternity? And this was the answer. How stupid you are. Down there everyone folded within himself and torn apart by his regrets. There is no relationship with anyone. Everyone finds himself in the most profound solitude and desperately weeps for the evil that he has committed. It is like a cemetery. Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned a lot from this video. Remember, if there's any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. Anyway, if you like our works and you'd like to support our works, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. Until the next one, stay safe, stay healthy, and may God bless you.
These different degrees of approaches in the church, from far right to far left, in between, outside of that, the church would be much more holy, I believe, if they follow this path of the saints, of obeying, unless you're told something that's clearly evil, and you don't do that naturally, okay? But like I said before, if you don't know it's evil, and it is, God will not hold you responsible for that, because your intention is to obey and please God.